Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and welcome to the Inner Voice Show, the show that's about you and your life and all that matters in your life. So today, I speak with an expert on psychological matters. Now, he's also my teacher, and I've learned so much from him, Dr. Michael Yapko. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Michael Yapko is a clinical psychologist residing near San Diego, California, and he's the author of 14 books and also an editor of 3 books. These include his well-known books on depression, Keys to Unlocking Depression, Breaking the Patterns of Depression, Depression is Contagious, and Hand-Me-Down Blues. He's also published dozens of articles regarding short-term active therapeutic interventions, as well as the clinical applications of hypnosis and other focusing methods. Dr. Yapko has been invited to present his ideas in strategic treatment methods to professional audiences all over the world and has lectured in more than 30 countries across 6 continents. He has received many professional honors for his contributions to the advancement of psychotherapy. Now, these include being elected to the status of fellow in the American Psychological Association and the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Milton Erickson Foundation and International Society of Hypnosis. Now, he maintains a vigorous national and international teaching schedules of trainings for healthcare professionals. So you can also see all about him and all of the information on yapko.com. Dr. Yapko, I'm so glad that I have you back on my show. This is our 3rd or 4th interview. Welcome.
Thank you, Foojan. Good to talk with you again.
Now, I know since last time we spoke, you have actually published 2 more books. I am so impressed. And when I was reading both of them, one of them is about depression, Keys to Unlocking Depression, and it's really written for the public, all of you, and also your other book that is for the therapist. And the style of your writing has been in a way that you're giving key factors to people, and it's been amazing. I've read both of your books within the past couple of weeks, and I'm just impressed. I was so excited. I was going to tell you to just send me like so many of the books for therapists for me just to give it as gifts to therapists.
Thank you, Foojan. I appreciate that.
So, Dr. Yapko, let's talk about...
Call me Michael, please.
Michael, sure, Michael. Can you please, let's start with the depression, Keys to Unlocking Depression. So if we start with that book, you have brought almost 49 points in 4 chapters, 4 parts actually, to talk about how people can assess their own depression, how to work and how to intervene in a way that they can unlock their depression. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the book Keys to Unlocking Depression that you're referring to is a very radical departure for me. Normally the books that I write are primarily for professionals, and they involve a lot of scientific evidence and scientific support for the points that I make. But I wanted to write something that was easy to read, short sections that people could read in literally 2 minutes or less, that really just make the point. As you said, there are actually 50 points. I was going to call the book 50 Things You Need to Know If You're Going to Overcome Depression. And then I thought, well, 50 things might sound like a lot to a depressed person. But I really just wanted to say these are the most essential things anybody would need to know if they're going to overcome depression. And I think the starting place is to appreciate that depression isn't a unitary phenomenon. It's not something that everybody agrees on in terms of what it looks like or what it feels like or what causes it. There are lots of different experiences, very different from person to person, lots of different viewpoints about what it's about. But the key thing that I really emphasize is that because each person is different, each person is going to have to learn their own vulnerabilities. Each person is going to have to learn their own risk factors, what sets them up for depression, and then making some pretty serious decisions about what they're going to do about it. So I wanted to provide some simple, straightforward advice based on 40 years of clinical experience and all the research I've done for all these books that I've written and articles that I've written and the things that I teach in the workshops. So there's a lot that we know about depression. There are things that we still don't know, of course, but there's a lot that we do know. And this book really summarizes very clearly and simply, here's what we know, here's what it means, here's what anybody's going to have to do if they're going to overcome depression.
I can sense that. Reading your book, there's a lot of differences where you talk about how to monitor your emotions, how to believe the emotions that are there to give you some signs where you need to take care of yourself, and then assess and not necessarily go into the emotions that are just there and fooling you and taking you kind of hostage. And then you also talk about thoughts, where one chapter says you're thinking too much, and then another one says you're thinking too little, where you can get very, very limited in the way you think. So you call that thinking you too little, and then when it's you're thinking too much and you're ruminating. And so you're talking about both emotions and thought process and the assessment of which ones are taking you more into depression and which ones can bring you out.
Well, one of the interesting points that I do talk about in the book is that depression has a very high response rate to placebos, interventions that really don't have any substance to them. In the medical tradition, they're sugar pills. They're not really active substances. But the fact that depression is so responsive to placebos can tell us a lot. And certainly one of the things that it tells us is how much of depression is a product of perspective.
Right.
And to put it very simply, the problem with so many people is they think things and then they make the mistake of actually believing themselves. And what I think you're speaking about and what I spoke to in the book is the fact that it is very easy for us to misinterpret experiences. It's very easy for us to mislead ourselves, to reach wrong conclusions that end up hurting us. And it's why there are many different approaches to treatment. Some approaches focus on greater emotional clarity and greater emotional expression. Some approaches focus more on thinking more clearly and more rationally, using information better. And that's really my point is there are lots of different pathways into depression. There are lots of different pathways out of depression. There's no single best treatment. There's no single way of defining it, but each person has to really know themselves well enough to say, here's what enhances my life, here's what diminishes my life.
And bringing your other book into this also, because it's a key factor that I had learned from you in the classes, and then I saw it in your new book, which is about it's about therapists being able to discriminate and figure out what it is that is the decision factor, and the way that you also teach that in how people can look at the distinctions of why a person makes a decision. It also overlaps with what you were talking about on the depression level is how does a person make a decision in the way they think and feel that leads them into depression or steps them out of depression.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that most of the time when people make decisions, they don't realize that they're making decisions. They're just reacting reflexively. Somebody points the finger of blame at them for something going wrong, and they reflexively accept that blame. It never occurs to them to even make a decision about it. Am I to blame or aren't I? They just go into feeling guilty and feeling bad. Or, as another example, the person assumes that they're helpless to change some negative circumstance, and it never occurs to them to ask themselves or anybody else, am I really helpless? Is there something I can do about this? They just retreat into helplessness, declare themselves a victim, and then they wonder why they feel depressed. So the first part of it is helping people even recognize when they're in a position to make a choice instead of just reacting reflexively, and then how to choose wisely. I'm less interested in what the choices are that people make, and I'm far more interested in how they go about making the choices that they make. You know, people are allowed to make choices that I don't agree with. People will live in places I don't want to live. They'll drive cars I don't want to drive. They'll take vacations in places I wouldn't want to go. Those are the differences between people. That's fine. But as long as people are making choices wisely, making choices with insight and foresight, being able to appreciate that if I do this, here's what's likely to happen, so that they're making choices that are going to serve them instead of just reacting badly, making things worse, and wondering why they feel so bad.
When we're looking at the key discriminations, one of the aspects that you talk about is in this type of decision making to see and assess if you're in control or not, and that could be a beginning of looking at how you make that choice. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, anybody who does therapy is routinely encountering people who feel defeated, powerless, out of control. They come into therapy believing that they are victims of circumstances beyond their control. They have reflexively assumed that they have no power at all.
Right.
So this is actually a constant feature of depression. Depression is built on a foundation of both helplessness and hopelessness.
Right.
But the control part, the helplessness part, is what I'm going to address in your question. So the key question is, when somebody assumes that they don't have control and they just give up and they don't expend any effort to try to help themselves, that's the passivity of depression. People just give up, or they say, they'll take a drug and hope that the drug works, that somehow the drug will magically transform their life. I have to be the one to teach this person, situation by situation, to make an assessment. How much control do you have in this particular circumstance? You may not be able to control what this other person says or does, but you can control your reactions to it. You may not be able to control whether this company goes bankrupt or not, but you can control how you react to it. So teaching people where the control is and how to recognize it and how to use it intelligently, because ultimately what we're trying to do is give people the recognition that they're in control of their lives enough to make choices about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And ultimately, of course, your quality of life is a reflection of the choices that you make. The choices about who you bring into your life, whether they're good people who make you feel better about who you are, good people who bring out the best in you, people that you like yourself more for being with them, or whether you bring people into your life who hurt you, who hit you, who ignore you, who criticize you, who withhold love and affection from you. You know, you're responsible for who you bring into your life. I'm interested in the question of how do you choose? How do you choose? And when people don't recognize that they have control and they just let things happen, that is also a choice. It's a choice to declare yourself a victim, and that's when inevitably people sink into depression. So there's the parallel between those two books. From the depression side of the equation, I'm interested in how people make choices that work against them. There is a model of depression that is called the stress generation model, and it addresses how people make choices that make their lives worse. They don't do it intentionally. But your doctor says to you, I see that you're depressed. I want to give you the names of 3 therapists. I think you should get therapy so that you can overcome your depression. And the doctor hands you a piece of paper with 3 names on it, and the person crumples up the paper and throws it out on the way out of the office. that's a bad decision.
Right.
And it's going to make your life worse. Or the kinds of decisions that people make, that they start dating someone and they observe that this person drinks a lot and they drink way too much, and they choose to ignore it because they're so happy to have somebody paying attention to them. That's a bad decision, and it's going to make your life worse. So we're looking at the relationship between the quality of decisions that you make and the quality of your mood, the quality of your relationships, the quality of your life.
Well, the part that I'm also hearing is that someone who's depressed somehow goes into the automatic thinking, as you said, that I'm helpless. And from that place of helplessness, it appears to them that they don't have a choice. So the question, when it's asked, how do you make that choice? It also implies that you are making a choice versus thinking that you are a victim and helpless about whatever is happening to you, even if that includes your own emotions and your own thoughts. Many people think that they're not even in control of their own thoughts or emotions, that it happens to them, it occurs to them, and they can't control it. We have that with addiction. We have that with many of the emotions that just comes in and overrides, it appears that it overrides everything. So just the mere fact of the way that you're focusing on how do you choose, first it tells people that they're choosing. And then it's amazing when it's like, how do you choose, where most people, they have put this concept so much on an automatic in the background, and maybe that many of the ways and the structures that they've chosen came from a very, very young place, that they have never revisited the way that they choose whatever it is that they're choosing today. And by the virtue of asking that question and looking at what's in my control and it isn't, and where is it that I can be responsible for that, which is your second point when it comes to the discrimination, discriminating between the points, then it really brings the person into a powerful place within themselves where they can do something about it. So it takes them out of the helplessness, brings them more into a power place where then they can revisit their choices and see even if their choices are up to par with who they are at this age and their skills that they have, or that they might not have the skills and they actually have to learn it.
Right. Well, everything you said is exactly right on target. It's exactly right. And the common denominator is something that you mentioned that I want to amplify. And that is that when you ask people how they've decided what they're going to do, so often they either say, I didn't decide, it just happened, or they'll say, I followed my feelings. And this is, I think, one of the ways that psychology, popular psychology, has really worked against people. There are people running around loose in the world who will say to people, trust your feelings, listen to your feelings, follow your gut, and they seem to miss the fact that feelings can deceive you. You can think things, you can feel things are worse than they really are, or you can feel like things are better than they really are, and it distorts perceptions and keeps you from really recognizing the truth of what's going on in a circumstance. I want people to use their feelings as a source of information, but not the only source of information.
Yes.
And this is what requires, again, what I call a discrimination strategy. How do you determine when you can listen to your feelings? How do you determine when you need to override your feelings? Anybody listening to us speaking has probably had the experience of trusting somebody that they really shouldn't have trusted,
right.
Or they've fallen in love with somebody that they really shouldn't have fallen in love with.
Yes.
And they followed their feelings and they ignored all the signs and indicators that this was not a good situation. And this is what's known in the world of depression as an internal orientation. The person using their feelings as the guide for what to do. Now, if you think about what I was talking about earlier in decision making, when I was talking about the stress generation model and making bad decisions, your mood affects your decision-making process. When you are angry, for example, you are far more likely to take careless risks.
Right.
When you are afraid, you are far more likely to be much more cautious about things. So your mood state influences your perceptions of situations, and your mood state and your feelings can easily lead you to overstate or understate what's really going on. So that's part of the teaching process, is how to use your feelings as one indicator, but not the only indicator. What other ways can you approach this kind of decision? What other pieces of information do you need in order to make a sensible decision that isn't just based on your feelings? So I'll give you a simple example. I have a client who comes to me and she says to me, "I'm so lonely. I sit in my apartment night after night. Nobody calls me. Nobody comes to visit me. I'm so lonely. I go to work, and I work in this little cubicle, and people at work don't talk to each other. They send each other text messages, or they send each other emails. I eat lunch by myself. I come home by myself. I'm so lonely." Then I say to her, "Well, you stand a much better chance of meeting people and potentially developing some relationships and even friendships if every once in a while you leave your apartment." And then she says, "I know, but I don't feel like it."
Right.
And that's what I mean by making a bad decision based on your feelings. You mentioned, as another example, the books that I write. People say to me all the time, "Oh, you must really enjoy writing." Well, no, I don't enjoy writing. I like it when it's done for about an hour, and then I get started on the next book.
Right.
Do I enjoy writing? No. Do I enjoy the finished product? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I waited until I felt like writing, I would never write. If I never wake up and say, "Today I feel like editing," that just doesn't happen.
Right.
But there's something more important than my feelings.
Waiting for you,
There's
yes.
something much more important.
It also leads me to one of the other factors where are your expectations real or not? Because even with the two conversations you were talking about, is it a reality for me to think that I can sit at home and not take an action into going out and still have expectation that my perfect mate is just going to walk in, find me, knock at the door, and come over? So there's certain expectations that are just not real. And when they're not real, or they're too high, or sometimes too low of ourselves or the world, or sometimes too high of the world and ourselves, and sometimes just completely unrealistic, it also leads to some sort of a depression, because if it's too low about ourselves, we certainly put ourselves into positions that we're not thriving, and obviously we're not going to get the results that we want. Or if it's too high, then we're always in this state of disappointment that the world is not really bringing us what we want it to bring. So the expectation, as you were talking, is also a huge factor in how we make decisions, even how we choose for us to be in the world.
Exactly right. It's a really good point, because if you think about it, the way that we make our evaluations, whether it's about ourselves or other people, is filtered through our expectations.
Right.
That when you look, for example, at the marriage research, probably the premier marital researchers on the planet are John and Julie Gottman.
Yes.
And if you ask either one of them, which I have, the question, what determines marital satisfaction, they will both unhesitatingly say how well your partner lives up to your expectations.
Right.
That if your partner's doing what you think your partner should do, then you're happy. And if your partner isn't doing what you think they should do, then you're not happy. but it misses the larger question: how do you know whether your expectations for this person are realistic or not? When I'm talking about this in workshops, I show a cartoon on the screen where a woman and a man are sitting on a couch, and she looks pretty unhappy, and the caption reads, "If you really loved me, you'd win the lottery." and you know, she obviously has no clue that her expectation is entirely unrealistic. But this is how we judge everything. If we go to a restaurant, if the restaurant lives up to our expectations, we're happy with the meal. If we go to a movie and the movie lives up to our expectations, then we're happy with it. People watching this interaction between you and me, if we're talking about the things that they think are important for us to talk about, then they're happy with us. And if we're not talking about the things that they think are important, then they're not happy with us.
Okay.
This is how we pretty much judge everything. And it really takes a very aware person, somebody who's much more self-aware, to be able to ask themselves the question, what are my expectations? And then the follow-up question, how do I know whether they're realistic? And that is one of the most common scenarios in doing marriage therapy, that one or the other has such unrealistic expectations about the other person. They want this person to be much more emotionally expressive. Well, this person isn't. Or they want this person to care about the things that they care about, and the person doesn't. And instead of accepting those differences and respecting those differences, they hurt themselves with it, that this person must not care, or this must be a mismatch, maybe I'm in the wrong relationship. And you know, I think, to me, relationships are such an important thing, especially from a depression point of view, when we know that people who are in happy, healthy relationships do better than people who aren't. Loneliness is a predictor of depression. Social isolation is a predictor of depression. So this is another element of a lot of the work that I do, is identifying what are the social skills, the relationship skills that go into building and nurturing good, healthy, long-term relationships. And I think that's a critically important thing. And those are the kinds of things that no amount of antidepressants can help you achieve.
Right.
Antidepressants are the most common form of treatment, but they can't address any of the things that you and I have been talking about. The medication can't teach you social skills. It can't build a support network for you. It can't teach you better problem-solving skills. And so it's really important that people be even realistic about the treatment that they get, to approach antidepressants realistically, to approach psychotherapy realistically, to approach a self-help book realistically.
Right, very much. One of the common expectations that I keep hearing as you were talking about relationship is that other people should be like me. So if it was me, I would do this. And I don't understand how come they do something else. And my family does it this way, so obviously his or her family should be doing it this way. And then the common one in a relationship is that I expect that he or she would just get it. Like if I'm coming home upset, or if I'm giving a hint, or if I'm just, kind of quiet, they should just get it. They should read my mind and know what I want and give it to me without me having to ask. And that is a very unrealistic expectation that happens within relationships. There are other common unrealistic expectations that also leads to disappointment and many times the depression, is an unrealistic expectation that we have from the world, which is the world should be fair. The world should be giving me what I want. If I put enough effort, it should just come through, and I should succeed at what I'm doing because I put the effort. Or, those are the pieces that we create within our relationship to the world, and then the other ones that are with us. I should be perfect. Everybody should like me. I should be lovable. Those are the things that come. They're a little bit unrealistic, but somehow it's just very common in the world, maybe from our narcissistic self, and you know, what the part of us that is a bit self-centered just has those types of expectation and runs you know, our life with it.
Sure. You know, I'm always reluctant to pathologize it. You know, to me, it's not about narcissism as much as it is, this is human nature.
Yeah.
To use your own reference point.
Right.
And realistically, what other reference point can you use? You know, that this is what your experience has taught you, this is where your thinking goes, and that's what you're tuned into. But it's exactly what I mean when I say the problem is when people think things and make the mistake of believing themselves.
Yeah.
The problem isn't that somebody has the thought that's so unrealistic. The problem is that they believe it.
Right.
And that's really the skill that we're trying to teach is how to get out of yourself long enough to find out, is what I'm thinking realistic? Is perfectionism possible? Is acceptance by others possible? You know, you don't walk into a political rally for the opposite side and start to talk about your beliefs and expect everybody to agree with you.
True.
You know, it's the wrong audience, and it's why, you know, when people go places that are at odds with their own beliefs, or they start hanging around with people who don't think the way that they do, the problem isn't that there are differences between you. You know, it's in good relationships, long-term marriages, healthy work environments, people will have different ideas. And what we're striving for is how to reach a level of acceptance of those differences. But you can't do that if you have the belief that everyone should think the way that I do, or I can only have friends who feel the same way that I do.
Right.
And that it's especially destructive in marriages.
Oh, yeah.
One spouse says to the other, in essence, you should be more like me.
Of course.
I wouldn't spend money on that. Why are you spending money on that? I wouldn't have those people as friends. Why are you having those people as friends? I wouldn't go there. Why do you want to go there? And they actually get hostile about anytime you want to do something that's different than what they want to do. They take it as a personal rejection.
Right.
And they miss the opportunity to appreciate something that social psychology has taught us so convincingly, that we get attracted to people on the basis of our similarities. But what keeps people together is how they deal with their differences.
Definitely.
And the more that we can help people tolerate differences, accept differences, even embrace differences. And if you look at the mess the world is in today, it's for this exact reason. You have a different God than I do, so I have to kill you. You have a different politics than I do, so I have to kill you. You have the wrong sexual orientation, so I have to kill you. You have the wrong skin color, so I have to kill you. And when people can't accept the inevitable differences, all you're going to see is a lot of conflict, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of devaluing of people that makes the world a much tougher place, and certainly at the individual level makes your own life much more difficult.
The one other area that you have in the book, which it's a very hard distinction for people to make, is it personal? People take things very personally, and it sometimes, because the effect is personal, and the effect of whatever happens hits them personally, the whole thing becomes personal. And it's kind of difficult for them to distinguish between, well, this isn't about you, and yet, yes, you have to deal with it because it is what it is, such as, you know, it might be raining, or it might be there's an earthquake in California. The earthquake isn't about you, but if it actually, you know, destroys your home, then yes, you have to deal with the destruction of home, and that part of it becomes about you dealing with it. But the earthquake was not, intending to hurt you or for that to happen. But then I think it's easier to be able to distinguish that when it happens to everyone. But for example, It's almost similar to this when maybe it's our boss or our mate or our neighbor or some other human being which directly they're dealing with us. So it appears that it's personal, and then yet it might not be. It might be their personality, it might be that they're in a bad mood, it might be that it's their need or their expectation that they're bringing in front of us, or they're just, they have anger issues and they're dumping it on us and it's their issue, and yet we have to deal with it. Can you talk a little bit about how do we distinguish between is it personal or not, and then what do we do with it?
Well, this is, you're right, one of the more complicated discriminations that somebody would need to learn to make. There are, as you point out, things that will affect you as a person, but they're not aimed at you.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's your example, an earthquake, it's pretty easy to appreciate that, that this earthquake isn't about me. And or a company goes bankrupt and 1,000 people get laid off, you understand that they didn't lay off the other 999 people because they secretly just wanted to get rid of you.
Right.
It's easier to understand that. But if you look at the situations where it most frequently shows up, I'll give you a case example so you can appreciate what I'm talking about. I had a guy come to see me who was very depressed. And when I asked him, so tell me about depression and what, in your judgment, you think it's all about, he says, I know what it's about. It's about my relationship with my dad. He says, I'm 45 years old. I've been a very successful attorney. I've made a lot of money. I've made a big difference in people's lives. I've been a contributor. I've donated. I've organized. I'm a good guy. And no matter what I do, my father does not approve of me. He said, it's been that way my whole life. When I was a kid, I used to hang around Dad and offer to help him do things and hoping he would spend time with me and notice me and love me. And he just never expressed any kind of appreciation or affection. All through high school, other kids are out playing sports. I'm helping Dad. I go to college. I decide to become a lawyer like my father. And when I told him I'm graduating law school now and I want to join your practice, he says, I'm retiring. I'll sell you the practice. He says, so I was hurt by that, but I bought his practice, and the first thing I did was I mechanized everything. I brought in all kinds of computers with elaborate computer programs to be able to look up legal cases quickly and find legal precedents so I could build good legal arguments for my clients. And I was so proud of what I did, and I thought to myself, finally Dad's going to approve of me. He brings his dad in to see the office and shows him everything, and his dad launches into a barrage of criticism. I was an attorney for 40 years and I never used computers. Who's going to do your thinking for you? Is that what you're going to do? You're going to go to a courtroom and you're going to let the computer think for you? And what kind of attorney are you going to be in? He was just crushed. So while he's telling me this story, it is so apparent to me that here is a guy who is accomplished, he's a good guy, and his dad just doesn't have the ability to say, son, I'm proud of you, son, I love you. What he wants is reasonable. Who he's asking for it from, it isn't going to happen.
Right.
Now, if I simply say to him, well, your dad seems incapable of expressing appreciation, that's not going to have much impact. So what I did was I tried to make it experiential. He finishes the story, and I screamed at him, give me $1 million. And he looked at me like, what? And I said it again, give me $1 million. And he's looking at me like I've lost my mind. But he knows there's a reason why I'm saying this, and he just hasn't figured it out yet. So he says, I don't have $1 million. I said, give me $1 million. And he says, I don't have it. I don't know what you're asking. What is this? A joke? What are you doing here? I don't get it. What's going on? And I said, give me $1 million, give me $1 million, give me $1 million. Finally, after about 12 rounds, he gets it. I'm demanding something from him he doesn't have.
Right.
And the point stuck instantly. he, for the first time, realized this isn't about him not being adequate. It's about his father's limitation.
Right.
And that was a very new idea for him, and he got it instantly, a bright guy. He comes back for the next session, and he starts the session by saying, I have to leave 15 minutes early today because I have a business meeting with a colleague. I'm presenting this proposal to him, and then he says, now I don't know whether he is going to be okay with it. I don't know whether he's going to be able to support it or not. And he fully understood this isn't about him.
Right.
It's not about his proposal. It's about whether this person can handle it.
Right.
He got the point. It isn't about me.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what the other person's capable of doing. Now, sometimes it is personal, and that's why the distinction is important.
Right.
You said something or you did something that was hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take responsibility for that.
Mm-hmm.
It is personal. You did say that. But a lot of times, most of the time, the problem is when people take things personally that are not personal. Excuse me. I'm losing my voice here. So, I'm teaching people before you take it personally, read the circumstance.
And when
read the other person.
Right, and when it is personal, because part of the distinction when it isn't, but when it is personal, then there's also the perspective of then setting the boundary and communicating and then taking responsibility, not only if it's personal, because I've done something and I need to take responsibility, but also that if it's personal and someone is hurting me, and it feels personal and it is personal, then I also have to take it seriously and set boundaries in order to preserve and take care of myself. So it's that distinction.
Sure. Now you're into the realm of boundaries, because it's a lot easier to point the finger at you and say it's your fault than it is to say, I made a mistake. And so you would have to be clear about that boundary and to know, again, is this my fault? Is this personal? Or isn't it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's when we're looking at the world of depression, we're looking at different aspects of feeling, we're looking at different aspects of thinking, we're looking at the distinction between the way we make decisions and the way we make our choices. And when we're looking at those distinctions, then we can look at what it's needed to be done in order to have that decision move forward, or if that decision is a fallacy or an expectation that is false, then to let go of that decision and let go of that expectation and create an action which takes us away from the depression of helplessness and hopelessness, and take some power and responsibility and take some action toward creating something that we want. And when you are looking at the ability to distinguish between those, it makes it much easier. Now, the book about the depression allows you to look at different perspective, open it up, and look at the faulty feelings or beliefs and how you're thinking too much or thinking too little. And then the book for the discriminating therapist, which is for the therapist, is learning how to work with a client in creating these types of distinctions. Because although from a self-help book, we might be able to and have the ability and the skills to define and discriminate on our own, and sometimes it's such a subconscious concept and such a shadow or an unknown place that we do need our therapist to be able to open that the choices and distinctions for us, because it's kind of hard for us to look that deep inside if we're not used to it or we're not trained for it.
Well, even if we are trained, I mean, very simply, we all have blind spots.
Yes.
You can't know everything, and that's, to me, an important part of our discussion is this isn't about there being something wrong with you as much as there's something you don't know.
Right.
And if you don't know, you don't know. So if you know that what you're doing isn't working, but you don't know what else to do, talk to somebody who does. But to keep doing something that you know doesn't work just is not the most sensible thing. It's really not the best thing to do. And in many ways, that's part of what I've come to after all of this is I'm less interested in diagnosing people's flaws and weaknesses and pathologies, and I'm really much more interested in how can I provide the kind of educational experience that will help this person grasp the point that's going to help them make a difference. It's like in this case example with the attorney, it never occurred to him that it could be Dad's emotional limitation. It only occurred to him that he wasn't doing well enough to get Dad's approval.
Right.
And then when I asked him, can you name 3 things that your father approves of? And 5 minutes later, he's still squirming in the chair trying to think of something, but it never occurred to him. And that's simply a blind spot. It's not that there's anything wrong with the guy, but if you grow up admiring your dad and working and working and working to get Dad's approval, it would never occur to you that maybe Dad doesn't have approval to give.
Right.
And that's what I mean by a blind spot.
Right.
And that's what I mean by people being reflexive in the way that they react to things. And it's the things that you don't consider. It's the perspectives that you've never taken into account. It's the other interpretations that you haven't taken into account that inevitably are where the solutions lie. The things that you haven't considered is most typically the domain where you'll find answers. And to try and figure that out on your own isn't really likely to happen that much, the value of therapy.
And I remember in one of the classes, as you were working with me on the idea of how come, although I know I'm a therapist, I've worked on myself and I work on eating habits and weight and all of that for most of my life, that there is this blind spot that I keep going and eating while I tell myself I don't want to. And part of what the blind spot was, as you were working with me, was this decision making and the choice, as you had discriminated it, where I, for very good reason, obviously, had held on to this belief that I should be able to do whatever I want to do at any time and, just have pleasure and not have an adverse result. And obviously, from my logical place, that's very clear that that's not how I run my life. And then yet, in a couple of things, such as food, such as a couple of things where I had held on, like shopping and food, I had held on to that belief system and wouldn't let it go.
and how understandable. I mean, who doesn't want what they want when they want it?
Exactly.
There's hardly anything weird about it or bad about it, but there comes a point where you say, I can't do both. Right. I can't do everything that I want to do and then still have the kind of body I want or the kind of health that I want or the kind of career that I want or the kind of relationship that I want. This is the key point I'm making now. Every choice you make precludes other choices.
Right.
That if I'm sitting here talking to you, it means I'm not laying on a beach in Tahiti.
Right.
That if I'm in San Diego, it means I'm not in San Francisco. That if I'm going to be here doing this, then I can't be there doing that. And that's why all you have are the choices that you make that are going to define you and define your quality of life. The same is true in terms of time. All of us have the same 24 hours in a day. There isn't anybody who gets an extra hour or an extra 3 hours. Everybody's got 24 hours. Now, how you use those 24 hours, that's what's going to determine your quality of life.
Exactly.
And some people use 24 hours to read and get educated and take classes, and some people use their time to make other people's lives miserable and steal from them and break their windows, and other people use their time, to make other people feel better, and other people, take whatever they can get.
Yes.
And everybody's got the same time to work with. It's about the choices you make. So, the fact that you want what you want when you want it, well, me too, and everybody else too.
That's true.
And then it still comes down to, what the ultimate goal is. And when a goal matters more than convenience, when the
Yes.
goal matters more than immediate gratification, that's when goals get reached.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for every time that I've asked you to come to my show. You have graciously accepted, and hopefully you will accept
Pleasure talking
when
to
you're.
you as always, Foojan.
And when your next book comes, we'll talk again. And for now, for all of you who are watching, please, there's 2 books. One is Keys to Unlocking Depression. It's an amazing book with 49 chapters of key points that would really, really help you. And then the other book is Discriminating Therapist, which is for therapists, and it's an amazing book. And as I said, I'm going to ask him to send me volumes of it to be giving to therapists, because it is so specific in how to, and it makes it so on an easy level in a therapist being able to work and function, and how to be able to do that, discriminate. So
Thank you.
thank you for being with me, and hopefully I will see you again soon, and probably December in the Ericksonian Brief Therapy Conference in San Diego.
Good.
Wonderful.
Look forward to seeing you then.
It's the same here. Thank you. And for all of you who are with us, thank you so much for being with us. And until next week, create an amazing, amazing life and week for yourself. Goodbye.